guys, and welcome for another New World build which will include Fire Staff and Blunderbuss. This is a build that was really meta not long ago, and it's still super viable if you can use it in the proper way. Note that I was using this build few months ago, so my gear is not perfect, but I can still show you what can be considered as BIS and what can be used in this build. The reason for this build to be a meta not so long ago was because of the Fortify. As we all know, Fortify was the best way to defend yourself, and it was working flawlessly in all types of loadouts, being light, medium or heavy. The work of Fortify was reducing the damage directly, and therefore the light users could have stacked shirking fortification plus weapons that are applying Fortify in order to survive in really tough fights. Blunderbuss has exactly those perks in its Q tree, and therefore it was really strong pick. However, since the recent changes to the Fortify and how it applies, the Blunderbuss is not that strong on the defensive side of the things. However, its damage is still super strong, and it can still one-shot people if it executed properly. Before going into the build details, I must mention that the Blunderbuss can be used in a lot of different combinations. Of course, today we're gonna talk about fire and ice, but we have to note that this weapon can be suited in almost every other build. It's also worth mentioning that depending on your playstyle and your role of the team, you can play that build in light or medium depending on what is your goal. For example, if you want to assist the clump damage with AoE, you should play it in light and being a little bit far away from the fight. If you want to be a pressure for the enemy backline or a disruptor, you might be looking into the medium. The first and most common one is the light Fire Staff-Blunderbuss build, which is used for mass AoE damage, supporting the clumps and providing a huge burst of damage onto the choke points. For this build, you will be looking at Fireball, Pillar of Fire and Burnout on your Fire Staff, and Grenades, Net Shot and Azot Shrapnel Blast on your Blunderbuss. Of course, you will need some of the perks for this build as well, and you will be needing Pillar of Fire perk, Fireball perk, Plague Spreading Grenades perk, and Exhaustive Net Shot. Your main goal with this build is to keep a good healthy distance between you and the clump that is formed, but you have to still be able to do damage with your Blunderbuss as well. This means that you will be chasing targets which are already low HP, and if they are trying to get away, you can use the net shot to slow them down and reduce their stamina recovery. The second variation for light Fire Staff Blunderbuss is including the Claw Shot. As we all know, this is a perfect gap closer ability which provides us with a lot of mobility and chase potential. However, you should only use this spell if you want to be an assassin or part of an assassin squad. In this playstyle, you would be chasing single targets, mainly healers or ranged players, and you will be trying to reach them and one-shot them. In order to get the Claw Shot spec'd for us, we will have to drop the splitting grenades. So this is how the build should look like. So let's go over the needed gear. As we know the three different sets, we will start off with the light Fire Staff Blunderbuss, which is used for AoE clumps. As I said in the beginning, I don't have the perfect gear, but I will show you guys what I consider BIS for this exact role. On the headpiece, I have my Fire Staff piece, which is Resilient Pillar of Fire Elemental Aversion. On the chest, I have Resilient Fireball Elemental Aversion. Then I have Resilient, Refreshing and Elemental Aversion, combined by Resilient Shirking Energy Elemental Aversion, and for boots I have Resilient, Refreshing, Physical Aversion. Note that all 5 pieces have rune glass with fire damage, which is the main source of damage for both Fire Staff and Blunderbuss. Therefore, we really necessarily need to have the rune glass on fire damage. For jewelries, I'm using an amulet with stamina recovery, slash protection and health. For ring I have fire damage, mortal empowerment and hearty. And for earring I have refreshing toast and purifying toast. Note that in this build it's not really worth it to run keen on your ring just because of the lower multiplier on the blunderbuss, so therefore you want to double down on the fire damage. This will basically provide you a boost of your base damage and you will deal a lot more than with the keen. Also, you can replace mortal empowerment with invigorated, but it's up to your personal choice. For my weapons, I'm using fire staff with vicious, chain lightning and keenly jagged, and for blunderbuss I'm using flame attunement, net shot and keenly empowered. This build will mainly be focused on chasing down targets and trying to kill them. The reason for that is because I have the net shot on my blunderbuss, which means that the slow from it and the reduced stamina will be way more if I have the perk on the armor. However, if you want to get even further damage on your blunderbuss, you can take the Beast Blunderbuss, which is considered to be enchanted, attunement and keenly empowered. Also, something to note is that if you want to do even more damage with your blunderbuss, you should put 100 points into strength and go with only 265 intelligence. Please note that this build is only used if you know for sure that you're gonna use mostly the blunderbuss. As I'm a fire staff main player, I'm using mainly the fire staff and the blunderbuss is used just to finish off low HP targets. For the third and final build for today, we're gonna go around the medium fire staff blunderbuss, which is mostly used for either fighting onto clumps or being a disruptor for the enemy's backline. For this build, you will be looking at flamethrower, pillar of fire and burnout, and for the blunderbuss side, you would want to have net shot, shrapnel blast and splitting grenades. Your main goal with this build is to apply maximum pressure to the surroundings of the clump, which will include medium users or light users and mainly healers. Your goal with this build is to chase down targets and as soon as you drop them to around 50% HP to one-shot them with your blunderbuss. Remember that even being a medium, you still have a lot of burst potential and you can one-shot a person from 50 to 60% HP to 0. Also note that in medium, you are almost twice tankier than a normal light user. Therefore, you can play a little bit more aggressive and you can stay even for longer around the clumps. For the Fire Staff Blunderbuss in medium, I cannot really show you a gear, guys, because I've never played this build and I also don't have the correct pieces. However, I will list them on the site so you can see what is considered to be BIS. Again, for armors, you would be looking at 5 resilient pieces on all your armors, 5 elemental aversions on all your armors, and here is the fill up that you can use depending on what playstyle you want to achieve. If you want to go for claw shot and chase down healers, you would want to have the net shot and claw shot on your armor. If you want to support the clumps with big AoE damage and you want to be disruptor, you want to get the plague splitting grenades and the net shot. On the fire staff side, you would want to have the pillar of fire and the accelerated flamethrower. If you want to fight really close to the clumps, it's even good to consider the fortifying burnout, as it will give you some fortify. Note that we are playing in a medium, so fortify now has its purpose. Fortify in medium is something good, but I still don't think that it's worth to go for shirking fortification over elemental aversion. For jewelries in this loadout, you can go for amulet with health, trust or slash protection and stamina recovery, or if you have a really good stamina management, you can go for health, trust or slash protection and shirking empower. Shirking empower works really well since you're gonna be closer to the clumps and you have more dodges in the medium loadout. Therefore, you can boost your damage even further by dodging some of the animations on the people around you. For a ring, you would be looking again into hearty, fire damage, and either mortal empowerment or invigorated. For earring, I think the best would be the same as the light build, which is refreshing toast, refreshing, and purifying toast. Last but not least, the weapons for this build should look like this. A fire staff should be with attunement, vicious, and keenly jagged, while the blunderbuss should have enchanted, attunement, and keenly empowered. Note that for gems on both weapons, you can use either opal in rune glass or tier 2 gems. However, I personally think that it's best to use the tier 2 gem on your fire staff and a rune glass opal on your blunderbuss. The reason for that is that with the fire staff you will be mainly using the flamethrower, which means that your stamina will be for the most time up, while with the blunderbuss you will be chasing targets trying to finish them, which means that you will be using the dodge animation quite often. And with that, we are safe to say that we covered the main builds for a Fire Staff Blunderbuss combination. Of course, there are many other builds with other strength and intelligence weapons, but we don't have the time to go over all of them. Please let me know in the comment section below or in our Discord community that we made, what do you think about those builds? Are you already using them? Do you have a better version of them? Or you have a completely different guide for how to use the Fire Staff and Blunderbuss? Also guys, I want to thank you so much for supporting me on Kick, and if you don't want to miss our future streams, make sure that you follow me there as well. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next one.